Hi there. If you have beautiful handmade sheets of paper that you want to display, this project is a great one to start with. This is a stab stitch journal that I made with handmade paper that has dried leaves embedded in it. You can check out videos here and in the description below for making this type of paper, as well as paper with flower petals embedded in it and other paper making videos. So let's get started with this guy. You're going to need a number of tools and materials, and I've listed those in the description below, so go ahead and check that out before getting started. Have all your tools ready to go, and we'll dive right in now. There are a number of pieces of paper that you will be needing for this book, starting with cover sheets, and that is the outside of your journal, the piece that will be displayed on the cover and the back cover. And I have here pieces of paper that I made with rose petals and lavender petals. I will be using these on my new journal. You will also need in sheets, pieces of handmade paper that can go inside the journal on the inside of the cover, so on the front and the back inside covers. So 2 sheets for that. And then your pages, some sort of paper to create the pages with. I have artist paper. This is a lightweight artist paper for sketching or drawing, and I'm going to make my pages out of this. You can use any kind of art paper or regular paper. If you want to use printer paper, that works too. You can even mix and match, use different sheets of different types of paper to play around with textures and be able to do multiple different types of mediums in your journal. You're going to need a piece of parchment paper for laying between gluey sheets as we're constructing the journal, and then some sort of mat board or piece of cardboard that you can make the cover out of. From these different materials, we're going to start cutting pieces to create our book. So I'm going to be making a book that is 8 7/8 by 6 1/8. That fits the size of the handmade paper that I have. You can change the shape or size depending on the type of paper you have or what shape you want it to be. I'm going to do it so that it's horizontal like this. You can also make a book that's vertical and do the spine down the side here. The same process, just changing the dimensions a little bit. So first, let's start out by cutting out the cover. I'm going to grab a ruler and my pen to mark my board here. I'm doing 6 1/8, so I'm going to measure up against this edge here, 6 1/8 by 8 7/8, and then I'll go ahead and cut this piece out. I'm using a paper cutter here. You can also use a cutting mat and an X-Acto knife or rotary cutter to cut out your boards and paper. And here is one cover. We'll do this again for the second cover. Now from these 2 covers, we would need to remove the spines. We're going to take 1 inch off for the spine, and we're building this section of the book right here, which is a separate piece so that the book can open up like so. So we're going to measure off 1 inch along one edge. So I'm going to come in, measure 1 inch, and mark that down, put 3 marks along the edge, and then connect them with a straight line. Like so. And do the same thing on the second piece. Okay, so now along that line, we're going to cut that binding off and save these pieces because these you'll need for the book. And then we're going to cut away 1/8 of an inch or less. So just slide your board over a little bit and cut off a bit of the board so you just have a sliver removed, and that will remove space so that we can have the binding separate from the book cover. And we'll do the same thing for the second piece. Cut along that inch line and then cut away the same amount as you did on the first cover. like so. So now you have 2 rectangles for the cover of the book and 2 pieces for the spine. Next, we'll prepare the pages for our book. So for me, I will be using these sheets cut in half in this direction, so in the horizontal direction. So I like to fold them in half and fold a little folding mark at the halfway mark, and then I use that to guide me in cutting this page in half. So I'll put it on my paper cutter and cut that in half, and then I end up with 2 pages from the 1 sheet. So I'll fold and mark as many sheets as I want my book to be. You can determine how many sheets you want in your book and then cut them to the size you need. If you don't have pages that perfectly fit your book, cut them down to the shape and size you need to fit your cover, or you can tailor your book to fit the size of your journal sheets, whichever way you want to do the design. I'll put the dimensions of my cover and pages in the description below, but feel free to play around with your own sizing and direction if you want. So cut pages until you have enough pages for your book, and this will be your book block. This is my book block. This will be my contents of my journal, and I've cut all these pages in half. So these are ready to go, and I'll set those aside for now. Next, take one of your cover pieces and some of the muslin, and we're going to cut a piece that's about 1 inch wide and the length of the board. So I'm going to cut and tear this piece so I have 1 inch wide here, and then cut it to the length of the board, like so. And I want 2 of these. If you have strings or pieces hanging off, trim them off or pull them off until you have a nice, neat piece. Now we're gonna start working on the cover. I have my handmade paper here, and I have coated these with Mod Podge to make sure the rose petals and the lavender petals don't fall off. You can watch my process making this journal in this video up here, and you can see in that the leaves on my paper keep falling off and my tabletop ends up really messy as I'm working. And so at the end, I Mod Podge the cover to seal everything in and make it nice and neat and usable. And for this one, I went ahead and did that ahead of time so that I wasn't losing petals as I'm working. So feel free to seal or Mod Podge, somehow coat your paper in order to protect it from wear and use if you want to do so, or move forward with raw paper. Now choose the side that you want to be the outside cover, and then turn it face down so that the right side is facing down and the wrong side is facing up. And we're going to create our cover pieces by laying a piece of the fabric on each side, and we're going to glue those down. And I'll show you what the layout will look like. We're going to take one of the spines and lay that on top midway across the fabric, and then the cover will go on the other half with a slight space in between, about 1/8 of an inch in between the 2 boards. So like so. So first off, lay out your boards on your paper, and we'll get an idea of where they fit on the paper so that we have about an even distance all the way around. So I'm going to lay this out like so, and then adjust where my piece of fabric is so that it fits nice and even between the 2 pieces of cardboard, like that. And then I'll fix this one. Like so. I'm gonna pull this up a bit. Okay, so then lift up your covers and make sure not to mess where the fabric is so that that stays in place. And then take some sort of glue. I'm using craft tacky glue, and we're going to put a strip of glue, 3 strips actually, right under where the fabric is going to be sitting. So I'll fold over my fabric so that I know where it's going to land, and then put 3 stripes of glue close together right next to it. like so. And then use your glue brush to paint out the glue so that it's nice and evenly coating this section of paper. And then lay the fabric on top of the glue and press it into the glue surface here. And there's one. Now we'll do the same thing to the other side. Okay, now we're ready to put the covers on. So you can either add the glue to the paper, or I prefer to add glue to the boards themselves and then transfer them to the paper. So I'm going to again use the same glue, coat the boards with some lines of glue, and then we'll spread it out with the paintbrush. And you want the entire thing coated in glue so that it adheres to the paper nice and evenly. So I'll use my brush to brush this out. And catch the edges a bit so that they lay flat. Okay, and then we're going to lay this onto our paper. So again, we're going halfway across this strip of fabric, so covering some of that fabric and laying this down so that there's an even distance on the top and the bottom and on both ends. And we still have space to put our spine on top of the fabric over here. And then I have a bone tool, or a, I think this is a bookbinding tool. I can't remember what it's called. I'll have it in the description below. But I like to use this to run along the board so that I make sure that it adheres to the paper and lays flat, especially the edges, so that there aren't any bubbles. Like so, and then we'll do the spine with some glue. Now we'll brush out the glue on the spine here. And this is where you can lay some parchment paper underneath so that you catch any of the glue instead of it gluing your surface. And then we'll place this, leaving 1/8 of an inch between the two boards and making sure that the edges are lined up on the top and the bottom. So 1/8 of an inch all the way down in between the cover and the spine. And then use your bone tool again to press this onto the paper so that we remove any bubbles. And if you notice that your cover is beginning to bow like mine is, don't worry about it right now, because once we have everything folded and glued, we'll set it under a heavy book so that it presses and dries flat. So let's do the same thing on the second cover. Now we're going to fold the edges down. I'm going to do the top and the bottom, fold them over first. And these are practice lines so that we can have a line in place before we put the glue on. I'll do the same thing for the second cover. And then do the ends. And I ended up with kind of a short end here somehow, but we'll end up covering that with the end cover, with the end page. Okay, so now I'm going to take some paper scissors, and I have lines folded into these pieces. On the top and bottom, I'm going to cut up on this the outside edge and then over, so I'm cutting off a square on the corners, and that way I'm removing bulk so that I end up with a nice tight corner here. And you can trim down any that pops out the side, like so. If you're working with thin paper, you can also do this where you're folding the corner in like so, and then folding the edges over top of that corner. And that works well if your paper isn't super thick, and you will have a nice finished corner. So folded and cut looks like this, and folded all the way looks like this. Once all of those corners are cut, you can take the glue and we'll start to glue down these edges. You can trim them down if you have a lot of excess as well. You can come in here and trim down so you end up with about 3/4 of an inch around the edges. And I'll even this piece out, so. And now we can go in with the glue and start to glue these edges down. So I'll put a line of glue on all the edges. And then use my brush to brush those out. And then you can come in, and I like to do the top and the bottom first, fold these over, and press them against the cover board, and then put in the sides. Make sure to fold the corners tight. Like so, and then this end, do the same thing, fold it over, press the corners in tight. And then we'll do the same thing for the second cover. Now we're ready to make the end pages. I have these two pieces of handmade paper. I'm going to come in here and mark where they need to be cut so that they fit the inside of my book cover. So I'm coming to the outside edge, all the way to the edge of the spine, or to the outside edge of the spine, and then to the other side. And I want to keep the raw edge. It's kind of a cool edge on the two sides. And then I'll cut for the spine and cut for this bottom edge. And now glue the end sheets onto the cover by adding glue to the inside all the way along the edges and then through the center, just like we did for the cover to begin with. Place your end sheets onto the cover, leaving a space on the edges. And you can use your bone tool again to work out any bubbles. Now take a piece of parchment paper and place one board with the glue side or the end sheet face up. Put the piece of parchment paper down and then put the second board with the end sheet face down so that they're sandwiched in between. And then place a heavy book on top and allow that to completely dry before you move on to drilling the holes and stitching the book together. As soon as your cover pieces are dry, you're ready to start the binding. I'm going to take a piece of paper and fold the edges over the end of my cover and then plot out the markings on this piece of paper so that I don't put marks directly onto my cover. So to start out with, draw a straight line like I did here with a Sharpie, and then mark out an inch over and draw another line at an inch. So I have an inch strip right here. And then what I did next was measure in a ½ inch from this far edge, ½ inch over, and drew a line straight all along that ½ inch line. And then I drew a new line at 3/4 inch. So I have my ½ inch line and my 3/4 inch line, and those are the two lines that I'm going to plot my holes onto. So now I'm going to set this book right on top here and mark in the outside edges with my black Sharpie to show my boundaries. So I'm working within these black lines here and these black lines here. This represents the spine, this space right here that is the spine of the book. I'm going to be doing a stitch pattern similar to this one. Okay, now I'm going to plot the markings for the holes on this template, and I'm going to do some eyeballing because I don't want to do exact math trying to equally space things, and usually your eyeball is pretty accurate at guesstimating spacing. So I'm just going to lay this ruler here on my paper to estimate out where things are at. And then I'm going to be marking these holes right here. So the top row of holes are these spaces right here. We're going to mark these out on our 3/4 inch line. So I'm going to do that about every 3/4 inch. So I'm going to put a mark, equal spacing, and I'm pretty much estimating here 3/4 inch all the way down, making sure to end with a space at the end. So I have marks inside, not to the outside edge here. So there's a space to the inside. And then between each of those marks and the outside here, I'm going to put a hole right here on the outside edge of this last hole on the 3/4 inch line. And then between each of the holes on the 3/4 inch line, I'm going to put a hole on the ½ inch line. And then one about a 1/4 inch from the edge here on this ½ inch line. So you can see I'm creating like a V pattern with spacing on the 3/4 inch line and then offset on the ½ inch line. Okay, and that is my plotting pattern for my cover. Now I'm going to take this and find the spine side and fold this over so that I have a fold line right along the edge here, and then a fold line right along this edge so that it will fit over top of my cover. And I'm going to slide this over top of the cover so that I can more easily see my plotting line. So I'll stick this over top. And then you can cut off the wings so that you don't have added bulk. Like so. And then you're going to take your book stack, your stack of pages, stack them so that they're nice and even, they're all matched up, and place your cover on top with the spine side right against the edge of your book stack. And I'll stack it up like this. And then on your second cover, find the spine side and match spine to spine. Match everything up like so. And this is the challenging part because you're trying to match everything up at the spine down here so that everything's even without messing up how the pages are stacked on the sides. So you have to press in to get the sides to match up, and then make sure your cover stays stacked, and then flip it to the side and you can check this end. That looks pretty good. Need to push the book stack in a bit so that there's an even space on the bottom edge as there is on the top edge. So I'm going to press those in a bit. And then take a piece of cardboard and place it underneath and a piece over top where you can still see your markings. I'm going to slide the spine over the cardboard so the cardboard is on the cover, not in the way of the spine. And then I have these clamps. I think these are called C-clamps. I'm going to use these and a guard board to clamp the book to this board. So I'll set this on here like so. And then I'm going to clamp this to the edge of my table so that I can drill the holes. So bring this stack out to the edge of your table or workspace. And then because of the type of clamp I'm using, I'm going to use the edge of the table to hold everything in place. And I use these pieces of cardboard so that as I set the clamp on the board, it doesn't create markings on my cover. And you might have to adjust where the clamp is as you work. I'm putting the clamp down and it's covering one of my holes. I'm going to have to adjust this later to make sure I catch that hole. So then use a second one on the other side. I'm just using 2 because the size of my book really only needs 2. Okay, and clamp them down, tighten this up so that everything's sturdy and it won't move around. Okay, now I'm using a drill. I have a 1/8 inch drill bit on my electric drill, and I'm going to drill the holes. You may want to wear a face mask and goggles and any kind of protective equipment when working with the drill. Be aware that you're working with friction, and so working on the paper, if you're working in one spot for too long, running the drill in one spot for too long, you can begin to burn the paper and it can begin to smolder. So drill each hole quickly but carefully. When you're ready to drill the holes, make sure to hold your drill straight up and down. Press it onto the marking for your hole spacing and drill straight down. Don't drill too far because you don't want to drill into your tabletop. That is why we have this board here to tell you when you've hit, so you can measure down, measure where the bit, how deep the bit needs to go, and then estimate where that is as you're drilling each hole. And if you need to adjust your clamps in order to catch any holes that you've missed so far, go ahead and do that. And then go ahead and unclamp everything. And remove your cover piece. And make sure you cut the holes all the way to the other side of your book. Now we're ready to do the stab stitching on the spine. I'm using imitation sinew for this journal. You can also use wax linen. That's probably one of the preferences for this style of journal. To measure out the length you'll need, I'll count out 8 lengths of the spine. So count from one end to the other, that is 1 length, and we'll do that 8 times. And then add a little bit of extra. And then grab a needle that will fit your twine and thread your needle with the twine, and then pull it over so that it's about halfway down. And we're not going to tie anything, you're just folding it over like this. Now we're going to start in a hole in the center, pulling up on a hole on the 3/4 inch line. So if you need to look to the back, you can. Stick your needle up and through a hole on that 3/4 inch line, leaving a bit of a tail. I'm gonna leave 4 inches of tail, and then go down a stitch at an angle on the 1/2 inch line. Press your needle down and pull through without pulling the thread all the way out of that first hole, because we are just leaving it loose, leaving a tail loose. We'll have to make sure we don't pull on the string too tightly. Now from underneath, we're going to bring it up and thread the needle from the top down into that same hole we just went through, so that we're creating a stitch over the edge like so, and pull tight on this stitch. So we're wrapping the binding like so. And then we're going to come up into the next hole towards this edge. So this hole right here on the 3/4 inch line. So come up, pull tight without losing your tail. Pull tight, and then diagonally go across to a 1/2 inch hole, to the next 1/2 inch hole. Go down, pull tight, loop around the binding, and go back down into that same hole and pull tight on the binding. Like so. And then again up on a 3/4 line hole. Down on the next diagonal 1/2 inch hole, around the edge and back down through that same hole, and pull tight. And then up through the last 3/4 inch hole, on mine at least, over to that 1/2 inch hole, around this edge and back down, and pull tight. And now for the edges, I'm going to loop around the top and go back through that hole yet again, creating a stitch on the side or the top of the binding. And then go up into this 3/4 inch hole from the edge, come back up, pull tight, and then go over the edge, around, and back up through that hole yet again. pull tight. And so now we have 2 top corner piece stitches. So now we're going to go back the way we came, going from this 3/4 inch hole over, going the other direction into this 1/2 inch hole. This hole on the 1/2 inch line. Pull tight. Then come up on the next 3/4 inch hole. You might have to check the back to see where you're going. Come up on that, and going back, we're completing stitches that we missed on the back side, as well as stitches that we missed on the front side. So we're just completing the pattern on both sides. And then back down this hole on this 1/2 inch line. Up in the hole on the 3/4 inch line, the next hole over. Down on this 1/2 inch hole line. Up on the 3/4 inch hole. Pulling tight on the tail when you get to it and the direction you're going. Okay, so we've finished this side. Now we're gonna go do the same thing this direction and then go back to complete and finish in the middle. Okay, so into the 1/2 inch hole, then loop around the outside edge and back into the same hole from the top. Pull tight, and then up in the 3/4 inch hole. If you can't guide it from underneath, you might have to look. Down into the 1/2 inch hole. Loop it around the outside. Pull tight. Out from the outside into that 1/2 inch hole and around to the side, not to the back, to the side like that, and then up into this 3/4 inch hole from the back and around the side and back up again. So we're looping that side. Pull tight, and then down this 1/2 inch hole, up in the 3/4 inch hole, down in the 1/2 inch hole, up in the 3/4 inch hole, down again, up again, and then down one more time. Then when you've reached where you began, come to the back and do a square knot right over one of the holes. So we're going to place them over this middle hole here on the 3/4 line. And we're creating a knot right over the hole so that we can then pull it into that hole once we've done so. So tie a knot, and I'm going to tie this 3 times for security's sake. And then grab the tail with your needle, thread your needle with that tail piece, and thread the tail through that hole and through to the other side, pulling the knot into the hole like so. And then you can clip the tail that's poking out right against the edge, and that will get hidden in there. And then clip this other thread right against the front edge, and there is your bound cover. And here's your completed journal. There are lots of different stab stitch designs you can find on the internet. Research and find a design that you like, and then just plot the holes according to the size of journal that you are creating. You can do this with any kind of handmade paper. Again, the videos that I've done in the past on handmade paper are in the description below, so check those out if you want to create your own custom paper for this journal. I suggest finishing it off with Mod Podge or some sort of finish so that the paper withstands lots of wear, like this one I did with Mod Podge. I'll probably add another coat now that it's finished in order to seal up the holes and the twine and make sure that knot is nice and sturdy. Like this video if you enjoy fiber arts and you want to see more of my videos. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Happy bookmaking.